Welcome back to Fitness or Fiction. I'm joined today with Curtis and his biceps. Today, we're going to answer 3 essential fitness questions. Cue the intro.
So with almost any question with fitness, there's more behind a simple question than you would think. But there are these inevitable questions that we run into where when somebody's looking to get active, especially after a period of, we'll call it drought, there's some major questions that just come up. And it's like, well, should we talk about these? Yeah, we should. I think we should. So today is the first part of a 4-part series talking about questions that are really typical. You'll see them all over the internet. It's almost like a rite of passage. It's somewhere where you have to go through if you're getting involved in exercise. And regardless of the amount of time you spent thinking about it, everybody's thought about it.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of generic information out there that people get caught up in. But so these questions that we're going to answer today is A, how often should you be exercising? B, when's the best time of day to exercise? And C, how long should your exercise or workouts take?
Yes. So recommendations, we can talk about how much exercise first. How often is kind of where we're going to start with. How often should I exercise? It actually doesn't really matter. And I would say it actually is more a time accumulation thing. So it depends on the style of exercise you're doing, for sure, the intensity of it, the type of exercise. But, moderate to vigorous exercise, we're looking for something about 150 hours a week.
Are you pulling that from the Canadian guidelines?
This is pretty standard across the whole damn world.
Are you pulling that from the world guidelines?
So the guidelines that they use in NASM or ACE or CanFit Pro, it's pretty much consistent across the world. And the World Health Organization is actually the people that are like, yeah, you should be getting about 150 minutes a week. Mm-hmm. And we're talking moderate. You could have the more vigorous, the less time you need in some ways. But when we start talking about what people are usually willing to execute as far as exercise, it's going to be low level to moderate. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be somewhere in that 150-minute range. But my question to you is, okay, somebody comes and says, listen, I'm willing to do my 150 minutes. How many times should I break it into? What do you say?
It depends.
Nice. Just like the adult undergarment?
That's going to be the answer, I think, for all of these questions today, is it truly depends on what your schedule looks like, what your lifestyle looks like, what your work looks like.
So I think we can nail it down a little bit better for viewers so they can be excited about it instead of just who knows?
It depends. Good luck. Bye.
Yeah, that's all. But if we were to say something like, in a perfect world, if their schedule would withstand it, what would you choose? How would you break up those 150 minutes? Would you go in 3 bouts of 50 minutes, or would you break it down further?
I would personally go for 3 bouts or 4 bouts.
Nice. So for me, I like to say, if you're willing to do it, I'll take it for sure. But if it's 150 minutes, I would actually rather 6 bouts of 15 minutes myself.
Really?
Specifically because we have more stimulus. Especially if it's somebody that's recovering, which in my experience, most people that are just getting into exercise, they got all sorts of drama that they're dealing with from not exercising. Mm-hmm. My back and my knee and all this sort of stuff. So frequency is actually a really strong thing that you can use for them. And it's going to limit their amount of time in one bout so they don't get so darn sore. Mm-hmm. The challenge with that outset is that if their schedule is kind of tough to find those, it doesn't really work well. So my first question is, what's easier for you? More short intervals or fewer larger intervals?
I could also see a lot of people have that all or nothing mentality as well, where they think that 15 minutes doesn't really feel like a full-blown thing, or they're not they want a little bit of the soreness, but they're not they don't want to be destroyed.
Totally.
So again, kind of depends on where you are at, what you're looking for.
So what I end up coming back to usually is going to be very similar to you, like around the 4-day week mark, because that's what people will do.
Mm-hmm.
But especially when somebody's experiencing pain, it's like, listen, if you just took like 15 to 20 minutes, 5-6 days a week, you'd be able to square this away real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things where, what is your style and what are you willing to do? Because if somebody was willing to do something as high level as like a Tabata interval, and they were willing to do that multiple times a week, which almost nobody is because it's horrifically uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But if they were, the amount of work that you could get done in that period would be worth multiples of just walking on a treadmill. It'd be crazy.
Okay.
So, but if it were up to me, the type of exercise would also be resistance training, which changes the scope for people also.
Yeah, and that's going to be another question. In regards to the how often as well, I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the schedule-wise. Is like, you want those 4 days all in one shot, bang, bang, bang? Or for me, when I say the 3 to 4 day marker, is I'm trying to get a rest day in between each one of those workouts. So 4 days of work with a rest day, ideally. But that doesn't mean it has to be that way. That's just kind of, it would be nice if it lined up that way. If you had to do all 4 in a row, then we can make that happen.
Totally. Well, the things to keep in mind when you're programming is how much fatigue am I accumulating? Am I allowing the system enough time to rest?
Mm-hmm.
And am I impacting performance on the next day by not having a rest day?
Mm-hmm.
So typically on a 4-day, you'd plan Monday, Tuesday, rest on Wednesday, train Thursday, rest Friday, train Saturday, rest Sunday. That's kind of how you do a 4-day week, which is pretty typical. But that way you can still hit some really good intensity during the workouts, and you're not going to be feeling the pile up or the fatigue from the previous day all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of one of those things where your how often is going to in fact impact the way that you program as much as what type of goal you have, whether it's strength or endurance or pain management or whatever it is.
Yeah. So that one's tied in a decent bow?
As much as it can be without specifics.
100%.
Yeah.
So number 2 is, when's the best time of day to work out? When do you work out?
I feel best working out midday, like something around 2:00. That works out really good for me.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, I worked out at 8 p.m. because that's how my schedule worked. I would leave work and I'd go see Henrik at 8 and I'd train until about 10 and then go home.
Yeah.
But when you look at research of time of day, you're going to have some really conflicting stuff. It's one of these things that we talk about. The hype is a challenge because first thing in the morning when you wake up,
rise and grind. If you're not waking up at 4 a.m., you're a loser.
Well, first thing in the morning when you wake up, you have like the most possible hydration of your spinal discs. So you'll have like back research be like, don't do heavy lifts, spinal loaded first thing in the morning. You let your back neutralize and whatever else. But I think my answer on this one would have to be, when are you willing to do it? Because I don't put in the same workouts in the morning. I'm not a morning person. The hardest 10 minutes of my day are the first. Like, it is tough.
Yeah.
So for me, it's not really an option. I've had contests before in the morning and then I did okay, but like wasn't feeling great.
Yeah.
I was working through something. So best time of day, you're going to find that a lot of research ends up saying between 2 and 6 p.m.
Really?
And they're going to say, usually what they refer to is that your body temperature is kind of at its highest and your state of mental and physical arousal is going to be at its best.
Yeah.
So usually what they're talking about, you can create a guardrail or a landmark for a lot of different reasons why a different time of day would be a good time to exercise.
Yeah.
But what they're using in that metric is like, well, when is somebody the most prepared? When are they ready to do something? Because first thing in the morning, a lot of people are going to need a lot of preparation, which kind of is back to this warm-up conversation that we have. And for me, I think it makes a lot of sense when you're like, well, when's the body temperature the best? When's their readiness level the highest as far as mental and physical energy? I think that's a really good landmark to use.
Yeah.
So for me, I would say that. However, this question itself is actually quite moot for me. Like it's a moot point. It doesn't really matter.
It is in the micro scheme, and in the macro scheme, if you've been training for 5 years and you're just getting it done regardless. It matters much more to get the consistency.
Are you willing to approach your workout with some intensity? Are you ready to give what you can give that day? And if you are, that's probably a good time for you. And not everybody's like you. Not everybody has the same schedule or behaviors as you. So, when do you feel best is a bigger question for me. Like, do you feel like you can engage at this time? Good, then do it at that time.
Do you think the consistency of our old schedule kind of like built the habit of 2 p.m.? Because that used to be my best time where I felt like ready to rock. And that was based off of just work schedule alone. But now work schedule shifted for me. I feel better now around like a 10 to 11 a.m. warm up. And that's not necessarily because I'm most primed to to work out. What a podcast rookie. Anyways, it's not that like my body's most primed and I'm ready to rock, but it's more so I just feel like, once the day hits, and I'm sure other people feel this way too, 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m. starts to hit, motivation starts to dwindle as the day gets later. So for me, if I can execute my workout before noon, I actually feel like I'm like, I was able to make sure I actually got it done. And I know not everybody has the ability to do that with schedule permitting, because I think a barrier to entry to a lot of people is if you're working a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 4 kind of job. You've heard it before. People are like, oh man, I got off work and it was 5 p.m. and I was just so tired. And like the resistance was so much higher to get it done. But the resistance was equally as high at 5 a.m., which would be the other opportunity. So it's like, I can't get it in at 5 a.m. and I can't get it in at 6 p.m. because the resistance was at its peaks. There's like a little bit of the struggle. So like you said.
Well, see, that would be the perfect person to say, hey, why don't you do a 20-minute at lunch? I'll give you 3 exercises. Here's what it looks like. It's in, out, wham, bam. Thank you, ma'am. Have your lunch. Go back to work.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yeah, there are strategies around it. But 100%, when's the best time of day to work out? People get too geeked out on trying to micro-optimize these little things of their fitness. Like, in the long run, if you've been exercising for 5 to 10 years, or you've got 2 years under your belt, it doesn't really matter. What matters is just the bulk of volume that is compounding and accumulating over time.
Yeah, this is majoring in the minor.
Whether or not you've worked out at 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. or 2 p.m., your biceps still look phenomenal.
You are obsessive. The thing that I would say is that, like, even still, if I'm having a hard time fitting it in, I actually still kind of come back to the 8 p.m. range. Because, my kids are in bed. Like, I put them to bed, so they're in bed by 8:30. But when I first started working out, I was hiding it from my brother because I was just a little guy. It was funny that I was working out to him, so I'd hide it. Mm-hmm. And that was right before bed. When I trained with Henrik, it would be, it was almost 6 years going at 8:30-ish to work out and do like Olympic lifts.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm actually really good later in the day. I'm better at 8 p.m. than I would be at 8 a.m.
Yeah, me too. When I was in my early 20s, it was like 8 to 9 p.m. workouts. Yeah. And then there's conflicting information out there. They would be like, oh, that's going to wake you up before you go to sleep. La, 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 la. But again, you kind of just got to, pick your poison and ride with it.
I do jujitsu at 7:45 on Tuesday nights. And it's hard. Like, if you've ever wrestled or rolled with somebody, it is hard work, cardiovascularly speaking. I'm overheated. I'm tired. I come home, I have a snack, watch a show, boom, gone. So, it ends up coming back to what works for you. And if you sleep like a champ after that, like I do, then beautiful. But a lot of this stuff comes back to this basic statement. What feels best for you? Are you going to do it? Are you going to give it everything you got that day? And, if you can perform well that day, you can do it consistently. Well, man, I would love somebody to research specifically you and say, well, you're not going to get results.
I think a lot of people really too need to watch that all or nothing mentality or that micro optimization where it's, well, if I can't work out at 5 a.m., then there's no point in doing it. Or if I can't do this, there's no point. I actually had a client, I just gave him a program this week, started on Monday, and he got the flu on Friday, so he's still recovering, and he just hit me up and he's like, wow, maybe I should just start fresh next Monday. And I'm like, well, it's Wednesday. If you feel better, dog, do a little bit of the program, do half of it. You might as well, what's the point of waiting to next week? I had some cookies last night, so I'm going to start my diet next Monday instead.
Yeah, well, that's when we start talking about majoring in the minor, it is analysis paralysis. People want to get everything just right. And it's listen, this is not about everything being perfect. this is about progress. And sometimes that progress is slogging through something that doesn't feel that great. But you can be more proud of yourself when it feels like that, I would argue. Like, hey, man, it was a tough day. I slogged through it and did what I could do. Frick, pat on the back.
Yeah.
You know? So that's one of those
best.
things.
Okay. Number 3, how long should you work out? 150 minutes due to the world guidelines.
The World Health Organization.
Oh,
Because
yes.
they've never steered us astray.
Yikes.
We're going to leave that one. One of the things that I would say about how long is if you look at the amount that you can sustain your performance and what you're trying to actually do, I would say that a workout stretching past 90 minutes, it's going to start being at a point where you better be refeeding or you're probably not going to be performing very well. And there's a lot of research out there that once you get up to a top set where you go to as much as your body will give you that day, that a lot of the volume afterwards as far as strength goes is garbage volume.
Yeah.
So I would say when we start talking about how long, if we leave behind the kind of 150-minute guideline,
Sorry, I was going to say there was actually a lot of there was a meta-analysis that was talking about garbage volume, and it said like essentially like a certain muscle group has like 6 really hard sets in it, and after 6 it's all pretty much useless. So if you're doing 25 sets of chest, like 5 sets of bench, 5 sets of incline, 5 sets of decline, then cable flies, then I'm going to do push-ups, and then I'm going to do dips, and then I'm going to do light dumb or close grip bench press. Like a lot of garbage volume in there.
Totally. And what if you flip that on its head and you're like, I'm planning for my 6 challenging sets. So you do like, you set up your RPE so that I'm going to take 4 sets of each. I'm going to take a 7 RPE, an 8 RPE, a 9 and a 10. For muscle gain, this would actually work really great. So especially if you're doing 6 to 8 reps, if you did that in your first exercise, so you have a really effective one on your last one, and you choose 4 to 6 exercises, probably 4 pecs, 1 shoulder, and 1 tricep, you'd have great results.
I think when we're talking about garbage volume anyways, I think it's easier for people to wrap their head around approaching 25 sets of chest at an RPE of 6 to 7 than it is to hit 6 sets at an RPE of 9 to 10.
Right. That's right.
And like that 9 to 10 effort of 6 sets, way harder. I've told clients like, man, I want you to go really hard for 40 minutes instead of mediocre half-assing it for 90 minutes.
Totally. Well, and I like to talk about it as taking your shots, right? So you ramp up to, okay, we did all of these previous sets to get up to this top set. I want you to give me what you have on this one. I want you to squeeze it out. This is what I'm trying to go for. And then you'll see them do something like, oh, you got an extra rep. It's like, beautiful, cool. So you got that extra rep. Next week, we're going to keep this weight the same. I want to see an extra one again. And these are things that are easy for people to wrap their head around and get excited about. But when you look about like how long should I be exercising, that research is kind of going to overlap a little bit. Where when we start getting to the garbage volume sets, are you going to be able to do very much load there?
No.
So all of a sudden our stimulus is away from mechanical tension. And mechanical tension, where you're working as hard as you can, but the bar speed is slowing down, but you're still performing really well as far as your 1RM, your relative intensity is high, your percent 1RM is relatively high. That's going to be when you have the most mechanical tension, which is the granddaddy or grandmama of changing your muscle tissue. That's what it is. It's pretty well researched. So if you're doing that, you're going to be like, yeah, I'm getting a great stimulus. When you start adding a bunch of sets after, what are they going to have to be? Your technique's going to be harder to hold unless you drop the weight. So all of a sudden we've lost percentage towards what you can actually lift. It's starting to dip. And then your actual execution quality is going down. So yeah, of course it's garbage volume. You can see what's happening. It's like, oh, I got to be sore because that's my only metric for the workout being effective. Bad metric.
I think there's a playing devil's advocate to the over 90-minute session. I think there can slightly be mental health value there if you're using the gym as an escape. Like there was times when I was a young man, I'd work out for 90 minutes to 2 hours. But it wasn't because like I was thinking I was getting optimal results, but the gym was just a safe place and it just felt, it was almost like mind numbing, like just sitting there doing your reps and like chasing the pump and kind of just doing your work. Like it might not have been optimal for the body, but it was definitely optimal for the mind at that time.
Well, and if you look at how you were working out at that time, you'd stop and chat with people and whatever else.
Yeah, so when you're like utilizing it more as like the social, more as more than just like I need to get my workout in and get out because...
Well, and movement shouldn't be seen as like a triple shot espresso. because it's never been that in the course of human history.
Mm-hmm.
We've always moved pretty consistently throughout the day, and we're seeing effects right now of not moving consistently throughout the day and having these little espresso moments, right? But
yeah, I was gonna say it's weird that like it actually is turning into espresso of like
F45, now it's F30, now it's F15, now it's 6-minute abs.
yeah.
Oh, that's a something about Mary reference. That's a good one. Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say, for how long should you work out, 150 minutes is the world guideline. But I think if you don't got 150 minutes, like put in what you can, because that's starting to get into that all or nothing mentality. Or if you're like, oh, 150 minutes, oh, there's no way I can do that. That seems like too much of a leap. Jordan Peterson was talking about psychology in regards to like, you know, executing tasks and like cleaning your room. And it's like, well, if you set the task to clean your room and you don't do it, then clearly the task was too large. And you need to downsize it until you can actually execute said task and start building on those wins. So like if you don't have 150 minutes right now, like nobody's saying that 60 minutes is something to crap on.
No. In a lot of ways, it would make a great impact to somebody's life, especially when we talk about mental health. If you were to spend between 10 and 20 minutes a day doing something that's like 60 to 70% of your heart rate, you would notice big changes in your positive affect, the way that you feel, due to physical changes in the brain, hypothalamus, frontal lobe, but also due to neurotransmitters. There'd be significant changes there. So, you know, one thing that I'm not a fan of is when people crap on exercise and they're like, well, you shouldn't do that. It's a waste of your time. It's like, you would need a very robust metric to figure out whether something was a complete waste of time if somebody was moving, especially in our culture. Like people need to move more. And I believe that thoroughly. The challenges that you run into in our culture tend to come back to we're eating a lot, we're not moving near as much. They tend to be that. There's also this argument of, you know, we're out of our house space way more. We have light way more, which really changes up a lot of rhythms that are biology. Like our time that we would spend in darkness not too long ago was quite large. And we're almost never in the dark anymore unless we're all the way sleeping. And even then, a lot of us aren't. So the end of the day, things have changed a lot. So if we can get back to some sort of semblance of what our bodies need, which is we need to move often. It doesn't even need to be super intentional. Like just move. And if you're struggling with where do I start, the answer is pick something.
Yeah.
Like you could hit the rower and escalate what you're doing on the rower over time. Be confident and proud in what you've accomplished. And you'd probably notice some significant health changes. So a lot of these questions that we're going to talk about, well, there's 13 questions in total. We're going to do about 3 a day. But a lot of these questions come back down to what are you willing to do? What can you fit? And like you were saying with, you know, is the task too large? It's like, well, yeah, if it is too large, pick something smaller. Because I'll tell you, the nights where I hop on my Kaiser bike in front of my TV and set 10 minutes is a joke once you get started. So sometimes it just needs to be like, you know what, I'm going to spend 3 minutes. It still has value. After you get to 3, you're like, oh, hell, I might as well stay here 5 more minutes. You know, so just getting started is actually a really, really profound thing.
Yeah, I think to summarize this, it takes conscious effort on your part to actually do some real planning and strategizing to decipher what exactly you're willing to give, and then you just need to execute on it. Even if you like that all or nothing mentality, even if it's something small, like start there and start building on your wins.
Well, life isn't really built around all or nothing very much. Because even myself, I've caught myself saying that in the past. Like, I'm either on or off. It's like, well, no. Like, you can think that if you want, but that's not true.
Yeah.
Like, even when you're driving, you never turned around being like, how did I get here? Well, you weren't sleeping. So,
yeah,
you know, it's one of these things where choosing something that you're willing to do, you know, how often should I work out? What's the best time of day? And how long should I work out? Those are 3 questions that really boil down to what are you willing to give and how bad do you want what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Because if you just want a little bit, you want to feel a little bit better, man, find something to do just 20 minutes at a time for now.
Yeah. It doesn't take 5 days in the gym for an hour and a half a piece.
No. And people think it does.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining me, Senator.
Likewise, Counselor.
Indeed. If you guys like this, leave a comment, hit the like button, and we'll catch you for part 2.